welcome. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Tonight, appeal court nullifies removal of Okeze Ikpeazu as Abia State governor, rules that federal high court lacks jurisdiction to hear the case. President Muhammadu Buhari solicits cooperation of African central banks towards repatriation of Nigeria's stolen funds. Rowdy session at the meeting between INEC and political parties in Port Harcourt as the electoral body fixes October as tentative date for repeats of River State rerun elections. And South Sudan's sacked Vice President Riek Machar goes into exile following fighting between his forces and the Presidential Guard. And on business news tonight, Nigeria's foreign exchange reserves fall to $25.78 billion on dwindling government revenue.
And on sports news tonight, Nigeria's team qualifies for the women's 4x100 meters relays final as the quest for medals continues at the 2016 Olympic Games.
And from Abuja, High Court rejects Ekiti State Governor Ayo Fayoshe's bid to restrain the EFCC from investigating the state's finances.
We begin tonight in Abuja, Nigeria's Federal Capital Territory, where the Court of Appeal not only set aside the judgment of Justice Okon Abang of the Federal High Court, which removed Governor Okeze Ikpeazu of Abia State from office, but also ripped into the judge by accusing him of, quote, raping democracy. Justice Ibrahim Belia, who delivered the lead judgment in the appeal filed by Governor Ikpeazu, held that Justice Abang erred in law by assuming jurisdiction in an originating summons that was not signed by any identifiable legal practitioner among the three lawyers that issued the said summons. In a unanimous judgment, the court held that the Federal High Court judgment delivered on June the 27th was not competent, having relied on an originating summons that was null and void.
Anxious lawyers and supporters of parties in 6 different appeals battling for the soul of Abia State Government House. This follows the judgment by Justice Okon Abang of the Federal High Court in Abuja, which sacked Governor Okeze Ikpeazu of Abia State for alleged falsification of tax clearance in 2015 governorship election. In a unanimous judgment, the appeal court held that apart from not properly signing the originating summons, the suit did not disclose any cause of action because it was filed even before the appellant submitted his documents. Justice Bidlia agreed with counsel to the governor, Chief Wole Olanipekun, that it was not the duty of the court to search for the signatory to the originating summons. The appellate court held that Justice Abang erred in law by making findings at the interlocutory stage by taking a stance on issues in the main suit, and that his conclusion at the interlocutory stage was a breach of fair hearing against the appellant. In another judgment by Justice Helen Ogunwumiju, the court held that Justice Abang erred in law in his order that the Independent National Electoral Commission should issue a certificate of return to Dr. Samson Oga when there was no evidence of forgery or criminality against the appellant. After reading through the judgment several times, I was amazed at how the trial judge arrived at his conclusion of perjury against the appellant when there was no evidence of forgery. To the list, his findings are ridiculous. The judge must have sat in his chamber, unilaterally assessed and computed the tax of the appellant, and came to the conclusion that he did not pay the required tax. But let me say that the courts are not allowed to speculate, as the trial judge has done in the instant case. With respect, we disagree with him in this conclusion, because it is the person that makes allegation of falsehood that must prove it. The appeal court also held that Justice Abang erred when he imported the phrase "as at when due" into the PDP 2014 guidelines. The judge then concluded that from whatever angle one looks at the judgment of the trial judge, the decisions of his court was grossly erroneous. The inadequacies of the tax receipt cannot be visited on Ikpeazu, who scored the highest votes in the 2015 governorship elections, as doing so will amount to rape of democracy. Having exhausted all issues canvassed in the suit, the court declared every action carried out based on the suit before the Federal High Court null and void, and set it aside.
It is my hope that this matter has been put to rest so that the governor of Abia State can rule that state in peace. These are members of one party. Let them go back and join hands and bring that state up.
It clearly says that the allegation that the governor did not pay tax is not true.
Happily, this is not the apex court in the land. The Supreme Court is still up there. So if our client decides, we'll be going to the Supreme Court to finally resolve these issues.
The battle may not be over yet in this Abia State governorship dispute, as parties are entitled to approach the Supreme Court if they are not satisfied. In the meantime, reprieve has come to Governor Okezie Ikpeazu. Amaka Okafo, Channels Television News.
In the meantime, the governor has welcomed the ruling by the Court of Appeal. Governor Ikpeazu believes that the judgment, while affirming his mandate, is a clear indication that the people voted for him during the election. He told members of the PDP Board of Trustees, who were on hand to congratulate him, that the ruling will spur him on to serve the people better.
He has done, that our mandate once again has been affirmed by the Court of Appeal in Abuja. This to us is a victory for the common people of Abia State that voted massively for us in 2015 general elections. We will be reinvigorated to continue our service to Ndabia without let. We must thank God Almighty for His mercy and grace upon us, and also say that we are grateful to the judiciary that has stood as the hope of the common man. Without the judiciary of this country, what would have been the fate of the poor son of a teacher who became governor at the mercy of God and Abia people?
Abia State Governor Okezie Ikpeazu. October 2016 has been tentatively fixed for the conduct of rerun polls in the disputed local council areas in River State. And this was announced today by the Independent National Electoral Commission during a meeting attended by some national and state officials of the electoral body in Port Harcourt, the River State capital. This comes after the July the 30th date was cancelled owing to incidences of violence.
The National Commissioner in charge of operations of the Independent National Electoral Commission, some national officers, resident electoral commissioners, security agencies and political parties converge on the headquarters of the electoral body in Port Harcourt, River State. Top on the agenda is concluding on the date to hold a repeat of the rerun polls in disputed areas in the state.
We've categorized about 14 different categories as to factors responsible for why we are going where. But you need to know where it's going to happen, what PUs and what constituencies are affected. Because you're going to mobilize people to come out and cast their vote. If those votes were disrupted, we need to rectify them so that they're not disrupted, so that they can be cast, so that you can have a representation.
One after the other, candidates and political party leaders have their say.
INEC officially cancelled that election of time, only for us to hear weeks later that people have smuggled the results of time back. I thought those people should have been arrested.
Then an already tense situation gets rowdy. It takes the intervention of security operatives to calm frayed nerves.
We don't want to stand here and complain about all the things we have complained about before. But if these things are made available to us, then we can look at them and complain. Because we know of places where elections were not concluded, but people were declared. What have we done? We have not killed anybody. We have tried to go to court.
The INEC National Commissioner in charge of operations, however, sets the record straight.
The REC has no knowledge of what happened. The issue about child Degeme and Ikpeazu has been flogged and overflogged, but when we looked at all the ECHAs, these are our findings. If anybody has a problem, we said the courts are there. If you
With no representation in the Senate, only 5 out of 13 in the Federal House of Representatives, and 20 seats occupied out of 32 in the State House of Assembly, it becomes imperative for the electoral umpire and the politicians to ensure that the polls in Rivers are properly concluded this time around. Emmanuel Ere, Channels Television News.
The federal government appears bent on exploring all available means to track funds taken out of the country illegally. To this end, the president is seeking the cooperation of central banks in Africa to repatriate such funds. This came to the fore as President Muhammadu Buhari opened the meeting of the Association of Central Bank Governors in Abuja. He also called for the removal of all bureaucratic hurdles in tracking illicit cash outflows.
It's the 39th meeting of the Association of African Central Bank Governors, holding 17 years after Nigeria hosted the meeting. As expected, heads of central banks from the region and other governments were in attendance. President Muhammadu Buhari was at the event to declare the meeting open. No doubt the region is grappling with the slump in global oil prices, rising inflation, financial inclusion and poverty amongst its people. President Muhammadu Buhari reminds the Apex Bank governors at the meeting of the key role governments must play to change this narrative. One of such ways, according to the president, is the repatriation of stolen funds by government officials across the continent. Almost $2 trillion is said to have left Africa since 1970. Corrupt activities such as bribery and embezzlement constitute 3% of such funds, while criminal activities such as drugs and smuggling make up 30%, and commercial transactions from multinational companies make up 65% of the funds.
We must intensify our surveillance and give guidance to the operations of our financial institutions to reverse the trend of illicit flows of funds out of Africa. We should all be serious in putting place measures aimed at ensuring that the proceeds of these illicit flows are repatriated to their countries of origin with minimal bureaucratic hitches.
The central bank governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, takes a further step towards checking this menace. He says cross-border banking supervision could reverse this. He is also certain that sound economic policies must be taken to transform the economy of the African continent.
There's no longer time for us to continue to depend on oil, that there is a need for us to diversify our economy away from oil.
A recent World Bank report puts economic growth in Africa at 3.0% in 2015, while per capita income growth is said to be slow, largely owing to its high population. Many expect that decisions reached here will translate into the economic well-being of the people of the continent.
In the meantime, the former military head of state, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, says the president is doing his best to tackle the socio-economic challenges facing the country. The former head of state made this comment after a meeting with President Muhammadu Buhari at the presidential villa. General Abubakar says his visit is to discuss issues of national interest and international affairs.